on this special home video edition of Sightings. Haunting visions of a strange world between this one and the next.
And it came in, it kind of did a little thing in the group, and then it was gone. It was the most extraordinary thing we've ever come across.
Sounds that seem to speak from beyond the grave.
Please try to give us a message. Please tell me who is here.
From 500-year-old Stirling Castle to an unassuming house in America's heartland, there are bizarre tales being told.
My baby is standing straddling my neck and it's got a butcher knife shoved down my throat.
Does science have an answer for these fleeting glimpses of a life after death?
There's something still left that needs explaining, which science at the moment doesn't seem to want to look at.
Follow a psychic on his incredible journey inside Alcatraz.
What Joseph is telling me is that he's been shot.
Suicide, unfinished business, lives replaying like an old movie on the fabric of time. Learn what it means to feel the real-life horror of the ghost experience.
Hello, I'm Tim White. Do you believe in ghosts? Don't answer until you watch this special ghost report from Sightings. What is a ghost? Well, if we're to believe Hollywood, it's a see-through human clad in white, perhaps clanking some chains. But as you'll discover in this report, the truth about ghostly phenomena is far more complex and far more terrifying than anything ever imagined.
And obviously it frightened me. So I just stood there and looked at it and it disappeared into the wall.
I saw a silhouette of somebody watching my room.
The feeling of fingers moving up and down your arm.
She was floating horizontally up and down in front of the window.
And I ran in the room to find her bed elevated off the floor about maybe a foot and a half.
You could not see through him. It was solid.
And I had the feeling that somebody was trying to enter my body or make a contact with me in some way.
About a foot from my bed was standing a ghost.
Whatever they are, whatever you call them, ghosts, spirits, shades, specters, apparitions, there is not a corner of the world they do not inhabit. From this haunted castle in England to this haunted house in Hawaii, a Bavarian monastery, an Italian apartment, mansions in the south, taverns in the west, from this farmhouse all the way to the White House, we have a fascination with ghosts.
But I have to tell you, I am puzzled because every once in a while our little dog Rex will start down that long hall toward that room, just glaring as if he's seeing something and barking, and he stops in front of Lincoln's door, the bedroom door, and would not go in the room.
One of the most interesting things about this phenomena is that it's not culturally dependent. For example, leprechauns are seen only in Ireland, gargoyles in Eastern Europe, but haunting or ghost phenomena has been reported in all cultures since the beginning of time.
How do you turn myth and legend into scientific fact? The search for photographic evidence has produced many hoaxes, but a handful of pictures defy explanation. Startling images, spectral apparitions. Are these people from the past trying to make contact with the present?
There's a lot of fraud in this, there's a lot of imagination, there's a lot of wishful thinking. But when you strip that all out, there's about 20% hardcore stuff that is exceedingly difficult to explain.
Within that 20%, haunted Longleat Castle in England. In 1965, a film crew in search of a ghost set up an infrared movie camera. After hundreds of hours of filming, they captured this extremely rare moment, a light emerging from one door and disappearing into another.
All the lighting conditions were controlled, the windows were blacked out, there was no possibility of moonlight or car headlights or anything coming through. When we saw the stuff later, there was this shaft of light, which is, to me, is completely unexplainable.
And indeed, this paranormal phenomenon has remained unexplained for 35 years. This New Orleans mansion's haunted history is chronicled in diaries written over 100 years ago. The family that originally lived here buried their dead infant in the wall of the nursery. The ghost of that baby's nanny is said to haunt the house to this day, a benevolent spirit watching over the people who live here now.
I've had dinner parties, and she'd walk through the room, and everybody at the dinner table would see her. She just ignores you. She just walks through as though no one's there. She never looks at you. Nothing, she just walks through.
But there's a darker side to the hauntings here. Other ghosts who the residents say are not kind but malevolent. 2 family dogs, a male and a female, have been recent victims.
The female jumped out of the second floor window to the ground below, and the male was dead in the solarium. No marks or anything else. He was just dead. But there was obvious signs of them trying to get out. They had clawed their way halfway through a wooden door. Something had frightened them to that point of mass hysteria.
When the apparition resembles somebody who used to live in the house, it seems to be evidence of survival. But there's another explanation, and that is that it's just energy recorded in the environment that gets played back by our brains, kind of acting like a needle on a phonograph.
In the quest for evidence, 2 researchers from UCLA, Kerry Gaynor and Dr. Barry Taff, were witness to the most celebrated case in ghost hunting history. Gaynor and Taff encountered an evil force inside one Los Angeles home, unlike anything anyone had ever experienced before. They called it simply the entity.
When I went over to her house, we conducted about a 2-hour interview, and during that time she told us a lot of interesting experiences, but I knew she was holding something back. And at the end of the interview, she finally admitted to us that she was attacked and raped by the ghost. At that time, we thought she was probably crazy.
The events that then transpired over the next 10 weeks were chronicled in the Journal of the Institute of Electrical and Electronic Engineers, including the night the investigators went from being skeptics to true believers.
The lady screamed out, "It's in my bedroom." We ran in there. She shouted out, "It's over in the corner." We fired our Polaroid camera in the direction that she said. We didn't see anything, but the picture came out bleached out white completely. She shouted out again, "It's in the corner." Again, we fired our camera, and it was bleached out completely. At that point, I thought the camera was just malfunctioning. I waited till she said it was gone, and I took 2 control pictures. Those pictures are perfectly normal pictures. The only difference, she said it was in the corner in the first ones, and in these, she said it was gone. A few moments later, we felt a cold breeze of air coming through the door, accompanied by a horrible stench, a stench so foul, some people were vomiting. We fired the camera in the direction that that breeze was flowing towards us, and again, the picture was bleached out completely, except at the bottom of the doorway, you can see a little round ball of light. A few minutes later, she screamed out, "It's right in front of my face." We fired the camera, and the face was completely obliterated. As you can see the curtains behind her, you can see her dress. She shouted out again, "It's right in front of my face." Again, the face is completely obliterated. Now, those were her exact words, "It's right in front of my face." Once again, I wanted a control picture. I waited till she said it was gone, and I took the final picture. And this is a perfect, normal picture. It's just dark because we didn't adjust the setting. There's a scratch on it, which we put on it when we tried to clean it a little bit. But otherwise, it's a normal picture. The only difference between these 2, in one, she said it was in front of my face, in the other one, she said it was gone.
Even with these pictures, Gaynor still had trouble convincing his colleagues at UCLA that he was on to something significant.
Initially, they would say, "Well, you're hallucinating." So then I would look at them and say, "Well, we've got 20 witnesses." And they would say, "Well, then it's obviously mass hallucination."
Gaynor returned to the house several times, bringing more researchers with him each time, and the eerie phenomena became even more pronounced.
We started seeing balls of light lighting up the walls, and everybody in the room would see this. And the lights would get bigger and bigger and brighter and brighter. And at some point, I finally started talking to it, and I said, "Well, if you're really here, come off the wall," because what I was concerned was that somebody in the room was faking it, and they were projecting the light onto the wall. Well, when I asked that question, the light lifted off the wall, floated into the middle of our room, started spinning and twisting and expanding in different directions simultaneously. It had full parallax. We could see it from all sides, and I had 9 professional photographers set up in the room that were shooting it from all sides.
The lights came in, it was like, it almost come in like in a state of anger. It almost came in, all right, here I am, this is me. And it came in, it kind of did a little thing in the group, and then it was gone.
It was the most extraordinary thing we've ever come across. It happened over and over again. We experienced a plethora of phenomena during that investigation.
The part that interested me the most was the fact that what we saw, we were able to get on film.
The photographers at that session had only limited success capturing the entity on film, with one notable exception.
What we see here are reverse arcs of light. One arc goes right here, another arc goes right here. Now, the reason this picture is so important to us is that the arc on the wall, if it were really on the wall, would be bent, because those 2 walls there are perpendicular. It's not bent, which means the arc is floating in space. The significance for that for us as researchers is, of course, that means it's dimensional and very, very difficult to fake. This was not somebody with a flashlight shining it on a wall. That light is in empty space.
The negative of this photo was authenticated by Popular Photography and was the only alleged ghost photo ever published in the magazine. Frank DeFelitta, the author of Audrey Rose, was also witness to the phenomena. His incredible first-hand experience in the Culver City, California house inspired him to write The Entity, which was later made into a motion picture.
All the instruments started clicking away. So I knew everyone was seeing this at the same time that I was. They were ducking, and everyone was saying, oh my God, look at that, oh my God. And then Doris started screaming. That was the woman who was being belabored by this creature. Started screaming, I don't want to see your lights, show us yourself. Damn you, show us yourself. She started cursing and swearing at it. And there, lo and behold, at that point, it started to appear. It sort of developed a kind of, a kind of arm was articulated. You could see sort of like an arm, and then a neck. And then of all things, a kind of bald head. Now this could have been our imagination, but collectively we saw the same thing, every one of us. We saw the same thing.
But we don't consider our pictures proof of anything. We consider them part of the struggle to gather evidence to try to understand this phenomenon. During our investigations, we spend thousands of hours trying to be in the right place at the right time. In the Entity case, for some reason, we were there. We were there at the right time. And we were experiencing the phenomena over and over again. Although some of the people there found it frightening, I found it very exciting and exhilarating. That's what I'm in this for. It's an opportunity to witness things that we've been taught all our life cannot be. It's a connection with the unknown.
But how do you prove that a connection has been made? How do you document with scientific instruments a phenomenon that seems to defy the laws of science? A worldwide organization of 300 researchers is now experimenting with a little-known method called E.V.P, electronic voice phenomenon. These researchers believe that in some cases they've been able to imprint ghostly voices directly onto audio recording tape.
Please try to speak. Please try to give us a message. Please tell me who is here. Please try to give us your name. The time is 11:50 a.m. Sarah Estep recording.
Sarah Estep is the founder of the American Association of Electronic Voice Phenomena. She considers herself a modern medium, attempting to capture the voices of the dead on audio tape.
The microphones are yours.
Who is with me?
I'm recording voices from other dimensions. I started a little over 15 years ago. As a psychical investigator, I was very skeptical about the phenomena. But I decided to try it and see if I could get voices, and I did after 7 days. I started picking up voices on my own, and I have continued ever since.
E.V.P. recorders worldwide conform to exacting standards to eliminate the possibility that their machines are simply picking up ambient sound or radio signals, and only new, commercially packaged tape is used. Surprisingly, the ghostly voices are not audible during the actual recording process. They're only discovered later, when the tape is played back.
And in some cases, the voices are recorded on the reverse side of the tape. Generally, the words are only heard once. We are repeating them here for clarity. The voices are often recorded at places that are reputed to be haunted. The Westminster Church and Burying Ground in Baltimore is one of the oldest in America. Many of the graves here date back to the 1700s. Edgar Allan Poe is buried here, alongside his young wife, Virginia. Beneath the church, catacombs reach deep into the earth. According to parish records, many of the people entombed here met a violent death. Legend has it the place is haunted. When Sarah Estep came to the catacombs, she recorded these voices.
I was here a few years ago, and I picked up the message. We leave the soul right down here.
Would like to speak. Would like to hear from you. And a message for us. We'll make the skull right down. We'll make the skull right down.
Point Lookout Light stands on an open promontory on the western shore of the Chesapeake Bay. Many instances of paranormal phenomena have been reported in this desolate place, events that may reflect the area's tragic past. During the Civil War, 50,000 Confederate prisoners captured at Gettysburg were held here. Forced to endure freezing cold, disease, and starvation, thousands died and were buried in mass graves near the lighthouse.
The prisoners were brought here largely by steamboats and were made to walk along the sandy beach up to Fort Lincoln, where they were then turned inland and marched to the prison pen. Over 50,000 Confederate prisoners made this march, and for over 4,000 of them, it was the last march they made since they died prisoners of war.
This has to be one of the places that I've investigated, that it's just the whole area is just full of activity. It's not just localized to one building or one spot on the grounds. It includes the whole area. I've never come in contact with anything like that before.
The phenomena at Point Lookout seem to follow one of the classic patterns of a haunting. Some ghost researchers suggest that highly charged emotions from the past may actually become imprinted on the environment. And in fact, many people have reported seeing apparitions in uniform, recalling Point Lookout's tragic Civil War history.
When I was driving, I saw a figure of a man dressed in long pants and a gray coat run across the road behind me. It was actually where many thousands of the Confederate soldiers were actually buried. I immediately returned, and when I got to where I'd seen him cross the road, there was no trail coming out of the woods on one side of the road, nor trail into the woods on the other side, nor was there any sign of the anybody in the area. This has happened different times, always on the same section of road. I've never been able to explain this occurrence.
Over the years, many paranormal investigations have been drawn to Point Lookout. Photographer Ron Stallings took this picture inside the lighthouse. Next to Nancy Stallings is what appears to be the faint image of a man in uniform. Electronic voice phenomena has been recorded in several locations inside the lighthouse. The basement seems to be the focus of this activity. Some scientists believe E.V.P. may be caused by the researchers themselves imprinting on the tape through psychokinesis, or as the result of electronic interference. But there is one aspect of E.V.P. that defies explanation: when the recorder asks a specific question and gets a direct answer.
Here in the basement of the lighthouse, I recorded the clear voice of a young boy that said, "I was seeing the war." Were you a soldier here?
I was seeing the war. I don't see you no more.
E.V.P. research supports the belief that some ghosts are human spirits that occupy a strange netherworld between our reality and theirs. Investigators believe that somewhere between these two worlds there is a door through which spirits enter our world and, if we could find it, a way into theirs. At Manressa Castle in Port Townsend, Washington, visitors are looking for that way in.
It's not unusual for Seattle-based photographer Steve Holderman to bring his cameras here to the Manressa Castle in historic Port Townsend, Washington. The castle is over 100 years old, but Steve doesn't come here for the architecture.
We came to the castle today to try to capture ghosts. We wanted to see images on film that we can't explain.
A paranormal agenda is quite common for the guests at the Manressa. People come from all over the country because they believe the third-floor castle turret is an energy vortex that allows spirits to travel between dimensions.
People commonly come from all around to see the ghosts. There are people in Seattle that come here regularly to see ghosts, especially on equinoxes. And Halloween night, you will always find somebody occupying 306.
The third floor of the Manressa Castle is supposedly haunted by several different ghosts. Historical documents show that at least 2 people committed suicide here. In room 306, a woman jumped to her death in 1921. Room 302, the famous turret room, is popular with amateur ghost hunters who request the room months in advance, then record their experiences in this special book. Records indicate that when the castle was used as a seminary, one disturbed Jesuit priest hanged himself here. If suicide is somehow a bridge to the paranormal dimension, then that would explain the frightening apparitions with which hotel guests and employees report having come face to face. People are often introduced to the castle by newspaper accounts or from former guests. Rod Freeman and Sue Johnston come here regularly with their teenage sons and their friends. They all claim to communicate with spirits through their Ouija board.
Definitely the darkest feeling that comes out is this Jesuit priest. We decided to ask him for page numbers in the Bible because that's easy to get through the Ouija board. There's a row of numbers there. And sure enough, he revealed to us a page number. And it's something that went along with the idea that he was perhaps evil or perverted in his life, and this is what brought him to the point of suicide. And we found a passage here in Psalm 101, "A perverse nature shall be absent from me, I will not entertain."
"Evil I will silence him who secretly slanders his neighbor. I will not tolerate one who is conceited and
arrogant." So perhaps he's trying to tell us something about himself.
People want to be scared. People want to be scared. That's why we're here. That's why we come, to experience what others have written about in these diaries that are in the rooms.
The forlorn ghost of Kate is by far the most common sighting reported at the castle. Although Kate lost her life in room 306, she's often reported lingering in the turret room. With so much haunting activity in such a concentrated area, Sightings arranged for psychic Rhonda Griffin to come here. Psychics claim to be able to tune in to a ghost's paranormal channel. Rhonda has a history of investigating hauntings and asked to be told nothing about the history of the castle. As a professional psychic, Rhonda allows us to see publicly how other guests have reported feeling privately.
Here, I can feel something right in here. It comes right up to the back of my neck. Someone's crying. Someone's crying here. Someone's waiting here. Did she jump out this window? The picture I just saw, I saw somebody fall out of a window. And when I saw it, my heart just jumped.
Rhonda claimed to be tapping into another dimension. With great emotion, she was able to articulate the tremendous pain and suffering she felt reliving Kate's suicide. Rhonda was describing in great detail shocking events that other guests had only reported seeing briefly. The psychic energy Rhonda was experiencing led her down the hallway to the turret room.
I'm feeling an energy vortex coming right down through the center of this. Now, a lot of times the way things are built, they'll help to amplify particular energies. Now, most places are built on what's called ley lines, okay? And it's a concentration of energy. Where these ley lines cross is where energy vortexes are created.
Rhonda felt that the energy vortex was at its strongest in the castle's attic. Then she began to sense the period when the Manressa was a seminary.
It feels like right about here, and I'm like walking through like a time warp, and it feels like I'm going back to another time that this place was very different. The structure was very different. It was used, it didn't have a family. I don't feel a family. Oh, I don't feel a family.
Allow the base thought to attract your attention. Despise the crooked practice.
I'm watching a man sitting on the floor. He's isolated, he's alone, he's holy. I see him. He's almost like, he's seated. And he would come up here. God. God. Oh, God. It's not rage, it's despair. It's a feeling of hopelessness, helplessness. He's very, he's a religious person. He's... I see a body swinging. I see a body swinging from a rope.
More messages came from the Jesuit priest through Rhonda. They were the very same page numbers for the Psalms that Sue Johnston reported finding on the Ouija board weeks before.
103.
Bless the Lord, O my soul, and all that is within me, bless his holy name. Bless the Lord, O my soul, and forget not all his benefits. Who forgives all your iniquities, who heals all your diseases, who redeems your life from the grave, who crowns you with loving kindness and...
You watch someone do this and you have to think in the back of your mind, well, this could be some kind of a put-on type of deal. But then she came up with a couple things tonight that were unexplainable. And how'd she come up with the page number in the Bible? I can't explain that. No one else can either. It just happened.
After taking over 1,000 photographs at the castle, Steve processed the film in his Seattle studio. Using 5 different types of black and white and 3 kinds of high-speed color film, he discovered something he can't explain.
This was taken on the same camera, the same film stock. This is just the first frame, this is the second frame. And as you can see right here, there's a weird little bit of density on the film, and I've looked on it with a loop and I can't tell what it is. And on this one, you can't see it. I just can't explain why this is like it is.
Some experts claim that this optical phenomenon is typical of other ghost photographs. The castle seems to touch everyone who travels here with an open mind. Is there an energy vortex at work? Believers insist that a trip to Manressa Castle, especially during a full moon, is like taking a cruise to another dimension.
1 in 10 Americans claims to have seen or been in the presence of a ghost. For most, it's an exhilarating split-second glimpse of a paranormal realm. But in a few cases, the experience is dramatic, constant, and terrifying. For them, ghosts are real because they believe they have the scars, both emotional and physical, to prove it.
It's an unlikely setting for this real-life horror story. America's heartland, where the promise of the American dream can still be realized. Clean air and water, safe neighborhoods, a place where you can still buy a house and start your own business. All the reasons why the King family came here to raise their children and why they want to stay. But staying means confronting an evil force that seems to have possessed the family.
One night I went to bed in the early a.m. and I woke up and my daughter, who was not quite a year old, still in diapers. She wasn't even walking. She could stand. I woke up the next morning and I felt pressure on my jaw real hard. And when I woke up and I looked up, my baby is standing straddling my neck and it's got a butcher knife shoved down my throat. Her eyes were open and she just kind of looked at me and she started screaming like I'd woke her up, but her eyes were open.
The bizarre, violent episodes began in 1987, just after the Kings purchased this home and motel. The safe haven they'd sought here turned into a waking nightmare.
We could hear pounding in the walls, screaming, we heard chanting, we heard singing. Objects started flying across the room.
I'd wake up with bruises where it looked like somebody just beat me really bad, and bite marks.
When the Kings first came here and saw the home and the attached motel, it was love at first sight. But in retrospect, the Kings believed there were warning signs. The $60,000 asking price was reduced to $24,000 when the family made a serious offer. There were whisperings about a gruesome murder-suicide in the house. After the Kings moved in, encounters with the unknown force intensified. A mysterious stain appeared above the fireplace. The spot was sandblasted, but the stain came back. Fresh paint and new wallpaper immediately peeled off the walls, and spontaneous fires kept erupting near the attic. In desperation, the Kings consulted a parapsychologist specializing in poltergeists.
They were having poltergeist-like activity in the house, which to me meant that things of a shadowy nature were taking place. I also felt that the children were in danger, or could be in danger. I recommended strongly that they not be brought back into the house until the place was cleared.
But with their life savings in the house, the Kings were trapped. After Dr. Moscow's visit, DeFelitta began to have terrifying visions of a grisly murder. Was she seeing the ghostly images of a deadly crime?
The first time that this happened, I had put my daughter, who at the time was like a year and a half old, she was a baby. Had her in the tub, and she was standing here, and I was sitting on the side of the tub, and I felt that jolt. It felt just like somebody was running a movie projector on a wall. It was vivid color. I started seeing, what you call the images or whatever, of a man, and a man was sitting on the side of the tub fighting with the woman, and he killed her. And I mean, that's like I felt her. She released, and it was over. And then, you know, the little girl, he hit her the first time with the shovel, and sorry. Because I felt the emotion. She knew he was hurting her, and she screamed, "Mommy!" And Mommy was already sliding down, and he hit the little girl, and the first time she hit the wall, so he hit her again, and then her little head, blood just started, you know, kind of splattered on all through her little hair, and then he drug him over there.
It got to the point and bad enough where me and Stephen would even stay awake at night and just make sure we didn't feel anything or see anything happening to DeFelitta, because she seemed to be at one point getting the most attention, I guess, if you want to put it that way. She was being almost like violated.
And then it moved away from me onto the children, and they were actually being bitten. Ashley got the worst of that. She would scream and say, "Make them stop." And one time I jumped on top of her, and I was really mad, and I told him to bite me. And I could feel her skin underneath me. I could feel it like it was depressing, and I raised my arm up, and there was bites all over. And they were like biting through me, and they weren't biting me, but they were biting her. And that was horrible, because I couldn't stop them from hurting them.
Desperate to rid their lives of this terror, they turned to world-renowned parapsychologist Dr. William Roll for answers.
This particular home is located in a triangle of high-tension wires. leaving open the possibility that the occurrences may be related to that situation. A home like this is a kind of hatchery for ghosts, you might say, because of the electromagnetic fields.
We accompanied Dr. Roll during his investigation. 3 prominent psychics were brought in to try and identify the source of the disturbing poltergeist activity. Finally, at 4:17 a.m., a breakthrough. The presence of an entity was strongly felt. Although our cameras couldn't pick up an image, Doretta felt she had made contact.
He's here. I'm trying to convince him to show himself.
Any idea where he might do that?
He's standing right here. You gotta work with him. I mean, this is the first time he's ever even attempted to be nice.
It's building. Right there.
Where?
Can
you touch where it is?
The wood.
Even one of our skeptical crew members felt the presence.
I feel it, and I see right there. Yes, right here.
We're just giving some, we're negotiating here.
My hair is standing on end. It's
Come on, man.
So strange. It's dissipated after all the activity of the evening.
Okay.
Calmed down. There it was.
Families who live in a home like this may experience, because of the place they're at in their lives, may experience events that have happened in the past in this house, in a house like this. There seems to be something that we call place memories. It's not only brains and minds that hold memories, but places also hold memories.
We raised the children that monsters weren't real and there wasn't ghosts and boogeymen. And we raised them to be really secure in that. And when this happened, and when it all came about, suddenly our belief system and what we taught our children was turned upside down and shook. And they looked at us, and it was that look of, we trusted you.
Despite the work of the parapsychologists, the Kings were finally forced out by the entity. They wanted a safer home for their children, but finances have made it impossible for them to abandon the home they own. They've had to move back, and no one can predict what awaits them now.
This haunting in America's heartland is a prime example of what researchers call residual haunting. In residual haunting, energy from the past doesn't dissipate. It remains in the environment, replaying over and over like an old movie. The older the place and the more tragic its past, the more haunted it becomes. This may explain why 500-year-old Stirling Castle is considered the most haunted place on Earth.
Since its settlement thousands of years ago by ancient mystics known as the Druids, the British Isles have had a rich history of communication with otherworldly spirits. At Stirling Castle in Scotland, more than 1,000 people a year report seeing and feeling evil spirits. In fact, since Stirling Castle was first built to defend the Scottish countryside in the 15th century, countless eyewitnesses have reported seeing ghosts, evil spirits, poltergeists, and demons.
I saw a shadow, no face, just a dark shadow in the corner. When I looked back again, there was absolutely nothing.
I've been walking around there at night and I felt a presence. I felt someone behind me.
Wasn't exactly on the ground. She was kind of floating, but she had her face away from me. It definitely was a woman.
The best known ghost in Stirling Castle is the Green Lady. And she is said to be the spirit of a servant maid who saved Mary Queen of Scots from death in 1661 when the bed curtains caught fire from a naked flame, a candle held beside the bed. Her spirit is said still to haunt Stirling Castle today.
What we saw just at the corner of the graveyard, up at the foot of the castle wall, was a lady dressed in green. It seemed to be glowing. There were 7 or 8 of us ran up to see what was going on. I mean, covering 25 yards. There was nobody in either direction.
I can't think of any other castle who actually has a photograph of one of the ghosts. And we have a photograph of a Highlander here, marching out of the castle. And you can see straight through him as he comes underneath the archway.
We sent the photograph away and it was tested and it wasn't a double negative. It hadn't been superimposed on top of it or anything. So that's why we believe it was actually a picture of the ghost.
Trying to make contact with ghosts at a site such as Stirling Castle can be approached in several different ways by both scientists and spiritualists. We brought 2 separate investigative teams to Stirling, each operating independently but both with the same end in mind: tangible evidence of at least some of the 100 ghosts rumored to live here. Internationally respected psychical researcher Tony Cornell came to Stirling from Cambridge, searching for scientific evidence.
One thing about the whole psychic field is it's full of contradictions. You can go to one case and say, oh, this is absolute rubbish. This is imagination. This is nonsense. You go to another one and you get a pearl of information. You say, well, we can't ignore this. So I should think, really, I'd say there are such things as ghosts. I've never seen one. I'd very much like to see one. Perhaps I might see one tonight. You never know.
Tony Cornell asked London's premier spiritualist medium, Glyn Edwards, to help him choose a good location for an overnight surveillance.
There's something here. There's definitely something here.
Here? What about over here?
Not so much here. Not so much here.
When we go out on an investigation, the kind of equipment we're taking is purely simply to confirm the physical presence of it. Is it in the mind of the person, or is it a real physical object? So what we do is we take equipment that will record any changes in the physical environment. Sound, sight, heat, geomagnetic changes, any form of electrical change, because we don't know what makes these things occur. So we want to know, if we leave this stuff behind, do ghosts then appear, or do they only appear because there's a human being there? Well, this is the kind of thing that we want to confirm with the instrumentation.
Cornell set up an infrared camera and a standard video camera to be left on all night. The next day, the video revealed nothing extraordinary, but the audio portion was startling. No one was in the castle. The lone night watchman was far from the recording site. The nearest road was more than a mile away. Listen again for what sounds like moaning and screaming among the electronic static. Could these be the ghostly voices of Stirling Castle's tortured dead? 2 days after the haunting sounds were recorded, Sightings brought in a second team, comprised of psychics and headed by paranormal researcher Malcolm Robinson. They hoped to find additional evidence of ghost activity. Their investigation took place near the recording site in the castle's old prison, called the Toll Booth.
We go along and investigate these cases, speak with the people involved to ascertain if indeed there are something of a psychic nature happening.
This group of psychic investigators uses a controversial and often dangerous technique called spirit rescue. In a rescue, the psychics attempt to become temporarily possessed by any spirits that may be present. They believe the tortured spirits inside them can then be released into another dimension. On this night, world-renowned psychic Rosemary Todlin claimed one ancient tortured spirit had entered her body.
They were taking me, they were bringing me back, they were taking me, they were bringing me back.
Rosemary appeared to be speaking as a centuries-old prisoner who had been tortured in Stirling Castle. While she was in her trance, other psychics attempted to liberate the supposed spirit from her and rid it from the castle.
You might never get another chance. This is your chance. This is your chance. This is your chance to be free once and for all. Spit it out if you have to. This is where you take that step through the door. A bigger door beyond even that. A much greater door, filled with light.
That I actually felt escape. I felt it physically and I felt it emotionally. And the pressure began to just evaporate from me.
Do you feel that the spirit has been released then from this room?
He's no longer here as far as I'm concerned.
So you're quite sure of this?
Yes.
Yeah. He wanted out, and he got an out. He got that door that he wanted.
Yeah.
And there's no way he'd come back here.
We know there were torture chambers in the Toll Booth. And indeed, if they followed the practice of the country at that particular time, and indeed over many, many years, then there's no doubt there were thumbscrews and practices within that toll booth to force confessions from the unfortunate inhabitants.
There may be conflicting views on the merits of spirit rescue, but Malcolm Robinson and his team of psychics believe that there is now one less ghost in Stirling Castle, that they have relieved the suffering of one tortured spirit in Scotland's House of Horrors.
Based on what you've seen so far, imagine what the ultimate haunted location would be like. It would be a place of historic significance, where great personal tragedy is imprinted on the environment. There would be multiple witnesses who have experienced voices, images, smells, and physical manifestations of otherworldly forces. You can imagine it, but you don't have to, because it's a place that already exists. It's called Alcatraz.
There's a strange pull you feel viewing this imposing outpost from shore. It was once the toughest prison in America, home to Al Capone, Machine Gun Kelly, and the Birdman of Alcatraz. It started in the 1850s as a military fortress defending San Francisco Bay.
We're in the guardhouse, built in 1857. It was intended to be used as a defensive point. There was a gun that would have been mounted here, but it never got used. Instead, this was turned into the first cell block on Alcatraz in 1863.
Insubordinate soldiers were locked away in tiny cells, measuring only 3 by 6 feet. They were beaten, chained to the walls, and forced to endure hard labor on the rock.
Alcatraz boomed, and by 1909, the cell house that dominates the top of the island had been built for the incarceration of military prisoners.
Alcatraz remained a barbaric military prison until the 1930s, when social upheaval reached a peak and mobsters ruled the big city streets. The Justice Department requested that the military surrender the island, and Alcatraz was transformed into a maximum security prison, the last stop for America's most hardened criminals. The monsters of society were stored here until 1963, when the prison closed. Alcatraz was opened to the public in 1973 and attracts 4,000 tourists a day. There are reports that Alcatraz is haunted. Could the pain and suffering endured by prisoners at Alcatraz still exist today in the form of ghosts?
I think it's a natural idea that when you come onto the island, you're going to be experiencing something a little special, you know, a little extra. Sounds of a cell door closing, somebody appearing and then disappearing. Those type of things would really send chills up your spine.
Ray Polo, a former Park Service ranger on the island, claims many ghostly encounters have occurred. But for the past 19 years, the Park Service has refused to talk about reports that Alcatraz is haunted.
Official policy about ghosts on Alcatraz is we would say that, in effect, well, maybe things had happened, maybe they didn't. It's just something that it wasn't officially sanctioned.
Are there ghosts on Alcatraz? We asked nationally renowned psychic investigator Peter James to spend a night on the rock. I walked with Peter as he tried to communicate with what he calls entities inside Alcatraz. As we walked through the cell blocks, Peter began to hear what he felt were the voices of tortured spirits.
Alcatraz was a place that drove men mad. Military prison.
They're in pain, and I'm in pain, and there's blood here.
They couldn't break out of the prison.
Like a psychic bloodhound, Peter was drawn to out-of-the-way places around the island.
I know little or nothing about Alcatraz other than what I learned here during the past 2 days that I've been here. And my feelings are strongly that there is an energy here unlike any other that I've ever experienced.
Peter claimed to have little knowledge of the history of Alcatraz. He said he let the spirits guide him, and they led him here to an area known as the Citadel.
This particular one, I feel there was a loss of life here. And this man was a sergeant. And this is an American life that was lost in this particular cell. And I feel badly. I feel beaten. I don't feel that I lost life from gunfire. I lost life because of neglect. I was neglected. I am responding to, there's a definite sense here. I'm hungry, I'm thirsty. There could not be any crime in the world worth the punishment that I feel this entity endured.
Peter had correctly identified the dank dungeon where military prisoners were kept. The specific ghost images he felt were later substantiated by our experts.
I'm feeling an American here. I'm feeling an American serviceman right here.
Men were kept chained down there, sometimes chained through iron rings to the floor, other times, as we understand, chained with iron rings in the ceiling.
Something is like going through my stomach. It feels like something metal, and my legs are in chains as well. And I'm feeling that if I stay here much longer, that I'll die.
Peter's feelings of death and torment followed us through the night. At daybreak, we replayed Peter's observations for our experts, like ex-guard Al Bloomquist. And after each of Peter's encounters, our experts confirmed the accuracy of his psychic visions.
Forced to comply with these orders that I'm being given, and I feel like I'm being trapped here in this particular area.
We were told there's trouble on the rock.
On May the 2nd, 1946, 6 inmates with other lesser accomplices decided to blast their way out of the prison.
I feel like I'm being thrown into this cell, and I'm being thrown into that cell.
During that time, they gathered up 9 officers, put them inside of cells to be used as hostages.
Who are the people in here? 4 or 5 are these prisoners?
I am a person of authority. I feel like I should be on the other side of this of the bars, but I'm here against my will. I am here I am placed here by force, and at the point of the gun.
Who's holding it? Who's shooting?
I feel that Joseph is involved here.
Joseph Kretzer, he was one of the toughest of the bunch. He was really a mean dog.
What does Joseph have to do with this?
Joseph is keeping me captive here. Joseph is placing me here against my will.
Where's Joseph?
Joe Kretzer took the .45 automatic and started shooting these officers, innocent officers inside the cell.
I'm sensing that Bill or William, lost his life here.
Only one?
Only one.
4 or 5 here.
There are 4 here, but others are wounded. But I only feel one loss of life in this particular place.
Whose voice are you hearing?
I'm hearing William. There's a Bill or William.
William Miller later died in the hospital in San Francisco. Other officers were very seriously wounded.
The name starts with a C.
Cecil Corwin had his lower jaw torn away.
It's a wonder they weren't all killed in the spot.
Alarms sounded. Military reinforcements arrived. The inmates fled to a utility corridor in C Block. 46 years later, Peter James led our cameras to the same, now dark, corridor.
Peter, you've sensed a lot in there.
Yes.
Why don't you we have an infrared lens on the camera. Why don't you go in there with the camera and see what you can do?
I would like that. I would like that. Joseph, I'm coming through. Marty, Mark. Give me a better verification of a name. Marvin, is that Marvin?
Marvin Hubbard died in the utility corridor of C Block.
There's I am responding to a sensation here, and I feel like I'm losing consciousness. And what Joseph is telling me is that he's been shot.
Joseph Dutch Kretzer died in the utility corridor of C Block.
Oh, it's cold. It's freezing back here. There's a cold spot here. Oh, yes. Hello? There is a third soul here with the letter B.
Bernard Paul Coy died in the utility corridor of C Block.
So they're moaning. Moaning. The pain is so intense. They're like little boys back here. They're moaning, almost asking for the guidance of their parents right now. There are at least 100 ghosts here, 100 entities that walk these corridors, looking for a way out, looking for that life force that they seem to have lost somewhere, tragically.
I can't really say that I'm a believer myself, but like many people, I guess, there are some things that just simply are unexplained.
To deny the existence of ghosts is easy. Skeptics say, "I'll believe it when I see it," and walk away. But the people who have experienced a haunting firsthand can't just walk away.
Those who investigate the paranormal are driven by different needs. A scientific desire to find explanations to the seemingly unexplainable. And in the process, to perhaps find the answer to mankind's deepest question. Is there some form of life after death?
I know we live in an age where people say, oh, it's all nonsense. Well, it's not all nonsense. There's something still left that needs explaining, which science at the moment doesn't seem to want to look at.
To ignore it is to retreat into ignorance. To pursue it is to pursue one of the most baffling, enigmatic mysteries that we have ever confronted about the nature of our being. And in so doing, I think we have an opportunity to take a quantum leap in our understanding of ourselves, indeed, in our understanding of reality itself.
The people who have been touched by the ghost experience wonder why it's happening to them. And investigators continue to search for answers. They know something is there, but what exactly that something is continues to haunt them. For Sightings, I'm Tim White.